we see leaders also sometimes in organizations who take perfectionism too far, who take attention to detail too far, and what happens, you end up losing out on deals you could have won because you're over fixating on the grammar of the proposal. Everything has to be just right. And your competitor submits, they win the deal while you guys are still there, over perfecting. Yeah. Then of course there's our restless leader, and this person finds it very difficult to be content. They're not content with life. They're not content with themselves. They're not content with the situation as it is. They're constantly needing to be busy. I've never had those people who say, "Hey, I don't know how to relax. I always have to be busy." Yeah, okay, that's this person. Yeah, it's actually not a good thing. Yeah, it's not a good thing. I don't know how to sit still. I don't know. I always have to be doing something. Yeah, that's a sabotaging behavior. Why? Because our bodies have finite energy. Yeah, we need sleep. We need a good meal. We need exercise. We need rest. We need time, especially as you grow older, to take time aside and reflect on what's going on in your life. Yeah. Restless people also will be very difficult to work with because they are constantly changing things. Yeah, changing goalposts, changing the result frameworks, changing this because of that need to be doing something new. Yeah. Then there is the controller. The controller uses, okay, we talked about the controller at the beginning, right? Yeah. Then there's the hyperachiever. This is the person who can never accept self-love, self-acceptance, and they continuously thrive because they are gaining accolades. It's one result after another, one achievement after another, one title after another, and they're constantly running against a finish line that keeps moving, because they want to achieve more and more. A hyperachiever is also very difficult to work with on a team because they are lone rangers. They don't wait for the team to catch up. They don't share information. They want to be the only person doing well. And then we've got the hyper-rational. This is the person who uses rationalization to manage their relationships. The other way to put it is they suck emotion out of relationships. They're the kind of people who, when people are upset, they'll say, "Let us stick to the facts." But you also have to talk about the feelings, you know, and the hyper-rational makes it very difficult for teams to show up authentically, especially when there are conflicts, They don't show up authentically, but also the hyper-rational will suck energy out of a team and it will kill innovation. And then the last one is the one who we call the hyper-vigilant. This is the person who sees danger in every corner. You know, this is different from risk management, because with risk management, you identify a risk and you put in place a plan to mitigate it. But this is a person who's afraid of everything. You know, during a brainstorming meeting, this is the person who says, "It won't work, it can't work, it won't change, nothing moves, nothing improves. That is not possible." And they suck energy out of the room. So these 10 behaviors sabotage our relationships with other people. And once our relationships with other people are sabotaged, then what happens? It has a knock-on effect on our results, because you can't work in an organization without other people. You can't achieve results on your own, and it also then affects your own personal well-being. So I hope that's clear. So we'll send people the chart so that they can look at it, and we'll also send them a link if they decide they want to assess themselves and see where they fall. So what is the opposite of those 10 things? The opposite of these 10 things are what we call sage powers. When you're not sabotaging yourself, you are actually exhibiting what we call safe powers. You are empathetic. You empathize with yourself and with others. What else? You are exploratory. You are curious about life. You're curious about what makes things work. You're curious about how people feel, how people engage. You're curious about different ways of doing things well. You know, the other thing that happens is that you're creative. You're constantly looking for creative options. I know, Helen, when you and I are working with organizations, one of the things we say to them is, your best innovation is within the mistakes that you're making right now. You know, and if you can find a way to improve on those mistakes, you can actually have a much more knock-on effect on your bottom line than when you're coming up with a new product. But of course, if people are feeling controlled and they're feeling bullied and they're feeling, they feel like you don't answer their questions because you're always avoiding issues, they don't bring their best selves to innovate, and therefore you're not solving problems within your team. The other thing that we work for is how do we navigate and look for options that will help us actually achieve the best life. You know, the good book says that there are many ways that are good, but not all of them are beneficial. And in this case, when you're using your search powers, you are more conscious about how you're making decisions, about which paths that you're using. So let me give an example. You've got you've just gotten married. Let's say you're male and you've just gotten married, right? So your bride is 3 months old. But there's an opportunity to go and study and do a master's. There's also an opportunity to take a loan and buy 10 acres of land. There's also an opportunity to be a part of your old boys' school's treasury group or something like that. All of these paths are good, but are all of them congruent? Are all of them going to come together to make your best self? And sometimes you oversubscribe because everything looks good, but not everything comes together in congruence to give you a healthy life. And when you're using your sage powers, it helps you make these decisions better. Yeah. And then the last one is it activates your intentions to be able to generate more results in the best way. So when we're thinking about moving from the behaviors that are sabotaging to building sage powers, we have to ask ourselves, what is stopping me from that? Now, when you work with a coach, a personal coach or a leadership coach, they can guide you to move from your sabotaging behaviors to your sage powers, right? Yeah, and they can actually help build that. However, sometimes coaching will not work, and this is the fun part for me of this conversation. Why won't it work? Because there are certain things that are within us, experiences that we have gone through that are actually the foundation of our negative or sabotaging behaviors. And these can only be solved through therapy. And this is where now the mental health conversation comes in. So things like poor parenting, there are people who grew up as orphans, people who are moved from home to home and they had to be forced to behave in a certain way so they could get school fees. People who had laissez-faire parents who never told them no, and therefore they get into the workplace and they do not know why everybody doesn't jump to their wing. People who had very authoritarian parents who are very strict and they fear to make mistakes. Then you find yourself becoming a controller. You find yourself becoming a hyperachiever because this thing happened in your past that is driving your behavior into going the way it is. So poor parenting. Secondly, are you struggling with psychological trauma? In Uganda, our country has gone through so many traumatic experiences. Whether you're living in central Uganda, whether you're coming from the east with the climatic change issues, whether you're coming from the north with the people having gone through the LRS scourge and everything, all of us, in a way, our country has seen some level of trauma. And sometimes the trauma might not have happened to you, but you might be picking up behaviors from parents who are traumatized, which is what we call secondary or vicarious trauma. Let me give you an example. When I worked for Basic Needs, we were delivering mental health services in Hoima, and grandparents would come to the health clinic because they can't sleep and because they're having nightmares and they're having they've been having long untreated PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, because of what they saw in the wars in the 60s. Then the mother comes with a grandchild. And she says this child is also having nightmares. And when you ask them to explain the nightmares, they're describing the nightmare of the grandparent. But this child has never seen war, they've never seen a soldier. But because the grandma keeps waking up wailing, soldiers, soldiers, help me. This child is now traumatized. Yeah. So exactly. So sometimes you might not be the one who has experienced the trauma, it could be your parents, and then it is carried on vicariously. Yeah. So sexual abuse, emotional abuse, financial abuse, neglect, all of those can affect your ability to show up authentically, it can affect your ability to show up empathetically, it can affect your ability to want to explore and be curious, and it affects how you make your decisions. The other thing that we have is unresolved grief, and as a country we have had our fair share of trouble. Many people have been orphaned young during the HIV scourge, they lost many relatives, they had to either live in other people's homes, and you do find that because you're not able to grieve adequately, you are forced to have to move on quickly. It's called move on. People move on, move on. And people haven't arrived at what we call a new normal, which is what the process of grief should be able to arrive at. So when you haven't arrived at this new normal, these deep-seated feelings of anger and resentment and depression that result in grief can actually cause you to have the sabotaging behaviors. The other one that I want to talk about is the value we assign to ourselves. Other things that happen to us sometimes give us the no value, and therefore we are constantly doing things to in the attention seeking. We talked about the pleaser, the one who's going to rescue people all the time, the one who's afraid and hyper vigilant because they think there's fear around the corner. All of this affects and causes you to have sabotaging behavior. Of course, we can't forget to talk about Uganda's 14.7 million people with mental illnesses. And what? 80 to 85% of these people are undiagnosed. And every time I'm training, I tell people the people in Butabika are more mentally healthy than many of us on the street. Why? They know they have a problem and they're managing it. Yes. Right, yeah. But many of us are walking around with undiagnosed depression, undiagnosed PTSD, undiagnosed anxiety, and all sorts of other social and personality issues that are actually affecting our ability to show up as our authentic selves. Poor mentorship is another one. And then the last one that I want to spend a bit of time on is people who are neurodivergent, or people who have what we call neuroatypical brains. These are people who have attention deficit disorder or who are on the autism spectrum. Their brains are designed to problem solve, to have relationships, to manage emotions differently from what we call the neurotypicals. And because their brains are not, the world is designed for the majority, which is neurotypicals, people who have neuroatypical brains sometimes struggle. And of course, if this is you are very technical, you're amazing at the work that you do, you're technically efficient, but you struggle with emotional regulation and you struggle with social relationships. So this is one of the. So these are the people who, when you have these issues, you're bound to have sabotaging behaviors. One of the 9, or a variation of the different 9 in different ways. Yeah. So as you just move forward to just start to wind up on this conversation, because I'm sure people are looking at and like, Tina, what can we do? Let's first talk about how you feel when you're not well. How do you feel when the saboteurs are active? Of course, you're definitely not happy with yourself. Some people will complain of headaches, that are not getting cured. People will have abdominal problems out of the stress. Let me tell you, controlling people is difficult. Being a hyperachiever creates a sense of undue stress. So you find that you have headaches, you have abdominal problems like irritable bowel syndrome, gastric reflux disease, people who struggle with constipation, who struggle with diarrhea, people who are having these issues, and you go to the doctor and they keep telling you there's nothing wrong with you, but you have the physical symptoms. It might be time for you to talk to a therapist. People who suffer from general body weakness, even after they have slept the whole night, you're just constantly tired and you're burnt out. People who have susceptible to flus and allergies, these are people who need to check themselves. These physical symptoms are actually your body telling you that something's not right. I'm not happy about the way I'm living my life and I need to do something about it. Then psychological symptoms include being irritable, feeling guilty, feeling worthless, feeling ashamed, fear of vulnerability. So you put on your makeup and you buy the best clothes just to make sure that people don't see what's happening underneath, and the pain and the confusion that you're going through, and then sadness. The other issues that people will see are changes in appetite, the craving for the sugars, the craving for the beers and the high sugar foods that actually make up for dopamine, because glucose and dopamine have a similar center that attaches to the brain. These things give you short-term gains. You then think you're okay, but then once that glucose is out of your system, all the other symptoms come back again. We see changes in sleep patterns, where people are complaining that they go to bed and they do not sleep, or they wake up until 3 a.m., or they do fall asleep and wake up at midnight and then they are awake for the rest of the night, and these kinds of people who also fall into this category. People who have reduced concentration, you sit at your desk, you stare at your laptop, but you just can't get the work done. People who fear losing control and therefore they don't delegate, you know. So all of these are symptoms. So when people say, what does mental illness look like? It's exactly what I've just described. It's not always people who are hearing voices or people who have, you know, bipolar tendencies where they're stuck in bed and depression all the time. Sometimes it's just these headaches that won't go away. It's the irritability, it's the guilt and shame, it's the abdominal problems, it's the changes in appetite, it's the sadness, etc. Yeah. So now let's talk about what we're going to do. So how do I use positive intelligence? A, I have to become aware of my sabotaging behaviors. And the best thing to do is there's a simple online test. It is free. You can Google it or you can inbox Helen and she'll send you the link and just find out how is it that I am behaving. Self-awareness. Get to know yourself. Yeah, get to know yourself. Because it's the first indicator. If anything that shows up, you know, 5 and above, sometimes 6.5 and above is something you need to pay attention to. Then the second one is now gain skills for self-management. And the first way to do that is to heal. Talk to somebody about why you are a controller, why you're a hyperachiever, why you're a pleaser, why you're an avoider, why you have high tendencies to be hyper-rational or hyper-vigilant, you know. Have these conversations and figure out what the root cause is, work with a therapist to get better. Yeah, work with a therapist to get better. And then, of course, the other thing that you can do is now begin to hang around people who can help you, hold you accountable to move towards making the shift from the sabotaging behaviors to the safe behaviors. Yeah, yeah. The other things that you can do are around, you know, building psychological safety. And psychological safety at the workplace is when you're in a situation where people can openly talk about why they're having challenges at the workplace, why they're not getting along, why they're making mistakes. Again, if you're tired and you're not sleeping and you're a controller, so you're not delegating, but you want to get all the results and you don't know how to say no. At some point in time, you're burning out. Yeah, and sometimes feeling burnout at work is not necessarily because work is a lot, but because you have sabotaging behaviors and also because you have issues in your life that you haven't dealt with. Yeah, yeah, that could also cause burnout. Yeah, so therapy is one. Go for coaching is the second one. Learn about yourself. Self-awareness is the third one. Find people who can hold you accountable from moving from the negative behaviors to the positive ones, which is being empathetic, being exploratory, learning how to make the right choices so that all your paths are congruent, you know, and being curious about life, enjoying life in general. Yeah. So I think I'll stop here for now, and then we'll see whether the audience has any questions.
Thank you very much, Tina. That has been a very wonderful. I have some questions here. Interesting. Awareness, I think, is a very important thing. As you were talking, I could see myself through some of these situations, but it's important to be aware. I think one of the things we've realized in therapy is the fact that people are so unaware of themselves. And even when they come into therapy, it's about everybody else who has done different things. But when you go into the conversation, you realize that somebody actually had a challenge, which they didn't actually realize. So one of the things at the end of this conversation, I would like to encourage you, please run that test. We are going to share the link, run that test and see what it gives you for you to be able to understand where you're at. It's a very important tool to be empowered to know who you are. It's easy for you to appreciate other people, other people's weaknesses, other people's strengths when you also know where you stand at. Very, very important. Thank you very much. The conversation has been such an interesting conversation in the sense that we realize that everybody has a saboteur.
Or 3, or 5.
3 or 5. The extent matters. Recently, we were meeting mental health with the Uganda Physician Federation, and I think it was Dr. Hilary Birimaso said that it's not about, he said that the issue is mental health varies. It's not the mental health that varies, but your mental health will vary based on how good you are at your own self-care. So the important thing here is for us to do what we call self-care, to understand these topics and understand where mental health is coming from. Mental health is a personal attribute. It's only you who knows where you're at. And as she was explaining, I'm sure many of you were picking your bosses, you're picking your colleagues, but have you found out where you are at yourself to be able to solve the problem among other people? Allow me to read a question here from one of us, anonymous attendee. He says, would there be potential for someone where someone can have two or more of these elements of controlling, avoidant, and people pleaser, etc.? I think you just answered that.
Maybe I can just spread it out. When you do the assessment, you will score something on probably 5 or 6 of them. You might score 0 on 1 or 2. So that what the test does, it just shows you the degree from 0 to 10 on where you are as a controller or a hyperachiever or restless or whatever. The one I always encourage people that anything that is 5 and above needs attention. Anything that is 6.5 and above is showing up in your everyday life and therefore requires for you to address. But most times people have at least 3 to 5 high saboteurs that are acting at any one given time.
Okay. And somebody is asking, in addition to that, is it possible for someone to switch between one to another, maybe depending on circumstances or what you've gone through?
Yes. So for example, when you're, let me give an example of when you're a controller. You want to hold everything into control. You're so anxious when you're not the one in charge, when you're not the one carrying the shots, when you're not the one telling people what to do and how to do it. So what happens when you find people who are resisting you? You become a victim. Yeah. Or you decide to go for just do your own thing, then you become a hyperachiever.
Okay.
Or you switch up the perfectionist in you, the stickler, so that now they have to understand that I am the one who knows. So you switch things up a little bit and become more of a perfectionist. Yeah. So you can actually also then between all of them. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you very much. I think you can see how we struggle at our places of work via simple information. Information is power, knowledge is power. Now you know as an individual. It's for us to improve the workspace. As you know, Minet's overall function here is to help you secure Africa's future. And we can only secure this if our workforces are vigilant, vibrant, doing all that they can and are able to reach their goals, are able to reach their potential. There is another question here which is slightly off probably to today's topic, but it's going to be very helpful. Kindly help us clarify the difference between anxiety, depression, and stress.
Very good one. So stress, one of the things I absolutely love to do when I'm training mental health is to tell people that stress is exactly that. It's stress. Everybody's experiencing stress. But the simplest example I can tell you, Helen, you and I sitting here are experiencing stress because we're talking to people who we cannot see, we don't know, we can't see their facial expressions. We are hoping there's actually other people on the other side listening. There's a part of us that's going, am I really doing a good job? Yeah, and that is stress. Yes. The issue is not whether there is stress. The issue is how you're coping with it. Stress is a daily. Stress is a daily. It will always be there. There's never a day when you shall say, I do not have stress. You're either coping with stress or you're not coping with stress. Yeah.
I just realized that even babies have stress.
Yeah, you get
amazingly. Just born doesn't have any problems, but they say they have their own stress from different ages.
Yeah. So now that is it. Now, when you're not coping, before things become, I wish we had so think of a continuum. A continuum is that number that we drew in primary school that had 0 in the middle and then negative and positive at the end. And this is your life going through. As you oscillate towards the negative, which means that stress is, the ability to cope with stress is decreasing. And therefore, what is happening? Mental health challenges are developing or increasing. So that's how I'll talk about stress. In the layman terms, to make it easy to understand. Of course, psychologically, we normally use other terms, but I think in layman terms, that's the best thing to use. So that's why we say that's why we say stress management. Yeah, we say stress management because stress is on every day, and I have to just learn how to manage and cope with it.
Yes.
Now, depression, on the other hand, is an illness. On its extreme end, it's an illness. On its other end, it is just a mood. Today I'm feeling depressed. Why? Nobody wished me happy birthday.
Yes.
But by 2 p.m., there was a surprise coming up, and then they send you cake, and then you feel good about it, and you move on with your life. So there's depression, the mood, but there's depression, the illness. Now, the depression, the illness has 9 characteristic symptoms, but the 3 most important ones are when I no longer do the things I used to enjoy, when I have a sadness that I cannot shake off, and when I have this feeling of guilt and fatigue and helplessness that I cannot shake off. When you have those 3 things for over 2 weeks, we say you're depressed. Yeah. Now, sometimes depression can correct itself. So not everybody who is experiencing after 2 weeks needs to go see a counselor. You've just lost a loved one. You'll have all of this. Yeah, it doesn't mean you need to go. You'll be expecting you to be depressed. You've just lost your job. We're expecting you to be depressed. But if you can't self-correct after 2 weeks, then maybe you might need to talk to somebody. Yeah. And then anxiety, on the other hand, is that feeling of apprehension, something is going to go wrong, this worry, this inability to relax, this inability to fall asleep at night, you're awake, and this fear that something is going to go wrong. And I remember people with anxiety sometimes will say, I'm having a bad day, something's going to go wrong, something's going to go wrong. Then they'll look at their news feed on their socials, and they'll see accident in on Ginger Road, and then they'll say, you see, I knew something was going to go wrong today, and it helps soothe them for some time. Then it picks up again. Yeah, so that's the difference. So anxiety is also can just be a mood. I'm anxious, I'm going for an exam. I'm anxious, I'm going for an interview. But any symptoms that last for more than 2 weeks are now beginning to tend to the mental health challenge, into the illness, into the
Thank you very much. On a positive note, we have counseling therapy. The clients who are on Minet panel, or as our clients, you have access to services for counseling, for coaching, for therapy, for any of these symptoms, for any of the diagnosis that you've asked as a question, anxiety, depression, so you have access. But for members probably who are not on the panel, please contact us on hope@minet.co.ug for further support and for further guidance on how you can access these services. They are available. There is an interesting question. We have about 12 minutes to the end of the show. I want to thank you so much for the information that you have shared with us. Positive intelligence, is this the same as emotional intelligence?
The answer is no. So this is what emotional intelligence is. Emotional intelligence is really about, do I know my emotions? Can I manage them? Do I know when I feel something? Yeah. Can I name it? Yeah. And then can I tame it? So one of the things we always say is emotions are an indicator that your status quo has changed. Emotions tell you that you're no longer happy with a certain situation, a certain person, or a certain event. Emotions are the things that say things have shifted and you do not have the current skills or know-how on how to manage them. So emotions in that sense are like a thermometer. They just tell you that things have shifted. So emotional intelligence is the ability to say, I am feeling sad, I am feeling anxious, I am feeling tired, I am feeling frustrated, I am feeling angry, I am feeling afraid. And that's that. And then now that I am feeling these symptoms, what am I going to do about them? So emotional intelligence is about how you manage your emotions. So it's very much about self-regulation, self-awareness and self-regulation. We do have a conversation, I hope we'll have one day, on just emotional literacy and emotional management. There are actually up to 120 feelings. Most of us only can name about 5 or 6 on our daily, but there's about 120 of them. And for each of these feelings, you assign a different strategy to be able to manage them. So that's what emotional intelligence is about. It's also, and emotional intelligence is also about understanding other people's emotions. When you see a person slamming the doors, do you know, can you tell that they're angry or frustrated or bored or just slamming the door, you know, yeah. And when you see a person is crying, does that mean they are sad or they are happy? Because some people cry when they're happy. I'm one of those people who cry when they're happy. And they are crying or they're happy. Yeah. So can you tell other people's emotions? So that's what emotional intelligence is about. It's about me and what's happening inside me and how I manage that. And it's about being able to look at my neighbor, to look at my friend, to look at my family member and say, so and so is going through something. Yeah. And I can understand and empathize with that.
Yes.
No. Positive intelligence, on the other hand, is about how I am thinking and how I am feeling and how I use that to generate the best behavior.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
And this behavior should allow me to thrive, should allow me to have good relationships, and should allow me to have to enjoy wellness. So if I have thoughts of people don't like me, and then I have feelings of fear, then I control. If I have thoughts of I am not good enough, and I have feelings of inadequacy, I become a hyperachiever. If I have thoughts of the world is a bad place, it's a mean place, you know, it's dangerous out there, and I have emotions of fear of fear and anxiety, I become hypervigilant. So that's how the positive intelligence works. There's a thought going on in your head, there is an emotion that is accompanying that thought, and the resulting behavior is a saboteur, is a sabotaging behavior. Yeah, so that's the difference between the two.
We are dealing with sabotaging behaviors at your workplace. You must have come across such people, and all you want to know from this conversation is that it's coming from somewhere, and every one of us needs help, and there's help on the way to come and support you overcome your saboteurs. And I think she gave us very, very good recommendations. I would like to thank Tina for this. Someone is asking, is there a book on positive intelligence that you can actually advise us to read?
Yes, there is actually a book by Shiraz Shamin. Just type, if you can just write it down. Shiraz is S-H-I-R-Z-A-D, Shiraz. And then Shamin is C-H-A-M-I-N-E. And also when you do the test, you will actually get a flood of information. They send emails every day. Yeah, so that's something that people can do. And of course, if they need conversation, they can find us. Maybe just before we finish, and then let me just say this last thing. A combination of sabotaging behaviors leads to a toxic workplace and a toxic family. And that's another reason why this conversation is very important. If you in your workplace are all behaving controlling or hyper-achieving, or you're all pleasers, or you're mixed up with avoiders, whatever, that combination of saboteuring behaviors creates a toxic work environment. And so when people say, my place of work is toxic, that's what they mean. They mean my bosses are controlling, my bosses are hyperachiever, my bosses are hypervigilant. And then the staff members are also responding because the bosses are bleeding on them, or the leaders are bleeding on them, then they're creating the same reaction. So before you know it, the workplace becomes toxic.
And so Monday becomes a very difficult day.
Of course, it's no longer thank God it's Monday, it's oh my goodness, it's Monday. Yeah.
Interestingly, Tina, 70% of our active life is at the workplace. And some people even more. So meaning this is the best place where we should have the best moments in life, best emotions, receive the best, enjoy the most. Unfortunately, it's the most toxic. In some places, not all. Probably not for our viewers who are on the call this morning. But what do you advise? I'm there. I see the toxicity you're talking about. I may not be able to point a finger. Where do I start from?
Ask for an employee assistance program. Ask for an employee assistance program.
I didn't intend to
No, I mean, now begin to share this kind of conversations with your leaders that actually there's a better way to work. All sabotaging leaders, all leaders displaying sabotaging behaviors will produce results. It's just not the best way to lead people, especially in the world that we're going to, where employee wellness and employee well-being are the most important things to help people drive through this burning world that we're living in. The other thing that, just before we finish, when your child comes to you in the morning and says, I have a tummy ache, I have a headache, Monday to Friday, then Saturday they're fine. Again, it means the school is toxic. There's a teacher who's displaying some of these behaviors, or another child,
or an influencer, or social media, or something that is happening wrong.
That is going wrong, and therefore the child will then exhibit this. And of course, even in families, you know, when you have two people who love each other, almost always they will, but because they had pasts that have not been dealt with, they come together, they sabotage on each other, and then what happens? You end up with a toxic marriage, which then affects the children, and then the cycle keeps going on. So positive intelligence is not just about being a good worker, it's about being a good spouse, it's about being a good parent, it's about being a good sibling, it's about being a good teacher, a good employee, a good business worker, a good entrepreneur. Yeah, you can't go wrong with applying.
And that is where work wellness employment programs are taking us. The Wellness Global Report 2023 categorically showed results that Africa has 87% of disengagement in the workforce, and it's growing. While I think it's America, it has improved by 23%, and they gave reasons. Part of them was the culture, and the culture and engagement in the workspace. So it's very important for us to find out that these are some of the things that cause disengagement. People come to work, show up physically to get their money because they need a living, but literally they're not giving the best of themselves. And this has an impact on you as an individual. If you're not giving your best, you literally have some mental issues around the corner. But your employer is at a loss, because if you're supposed to give 8 hours of active work and you can only give 3 active with your innovation, that means the employer is losing. He's losing. There's a cost. They're giving you power, there's internet, everything is paid for full. But of that, you can only give 3 hours of active time. So that's where we are coming from. Our role is to ensure that your workspace has got people who have been enabled. Some of these programs will empower them. Of course, most of the things, as you could hear from the presentation, are very personal issues. But at the end of the day, they are affecting and causing toxicity in the environment. And that's a dissembler. You could have a very good strategy for your employees. Everybody looks at it and says it's good, just like Uganda has very good, the best strategies that Rwanda takes. It's the same thing. Probably the issue is, are people engaged to execute? And these are some of the reasons, and these are some of the things that we're finding out. We would like you to engage in this program, and as we wind up, we would like to encourage you, Minet, Securing Africa's Future. Our call today is have a program that can facilitate your employees to be able to fight some of the saboteurs that do eventually affect performance, affect character, affect behaviors, affect emotions in the workspace. You need a very vibrant workforce. You need an engaged workforce. You need a happy workforce. And without it, you almost have no results. And so our expert is telling us this morning that there are programs. She's a coach, by the way, and she's a very good therapist for workplace people. And so you can give us a call to put you in contact with her to be able to run some of these programs. Some of these are long-term programs that you can run with an organization, building a culture of positive intelligence, of emotional intelligence. These are all things that we can do as we did. So as you ponder, as you think, please write down this email for further conversations on this, hop@minet.co.ug for further conversation on this. And if you want to get in touch with Mara Childs, Tina, the same contact, we can put you through to her. But as we wind up, somebody asked something that I think will close us up in a few minutes. He says, thank you so much. How do you handle individuals who always sought to create an environment to make their colleagues look incompetent or not performing, when in actual sense, they are drivers? They know that they are drivers, okay? Very, very important.
Yeah, reading in between the line, it looks like somebody is working with a hyperachiever, controller, hypervigilant person. There is a point where every HR department or every leadership in an organization has to agree on what are the behaviors that we are going to accept, tolerate, emulate, or build as we drive our strategy forward. And many times in our KPIs, we are measuring, did you sell? Did you submit the proposals? Did you fix? Did you, we measure the technical things. And then when it comes to behaviors, we just say team performance or a good team member. But as an organization, we haven't yet detailed the behaviors that actually make a person a good team worker or a good team player. Now, the first thing I'll say to this gentleman is encourage your organization to agree on what behaviors need to be exemplified, not values, behaviors. When at Minet, what are the behaviors of leadership? At Malachi, what are our behaviors that enable us to do a good job? So once we have agreed on those behaviors, then we can hold people accountable. But if you're telling me that my KPI is that I need to bring in, let's say, 30 billion by the end of this quarter, I can stay over toes, bring 30 billion, you congratulate me, but the rest of my team is bleeding. They are crying, they are miserable. Some people just can't come to work and they have killed all the other relatives. This week they buried a grandma, next week they buried, I don't know, the following week, because they are avoiding being at work. So we have to learn as human resources to balance between the technical output and the behavioral behaviors. So once that can happen, then it is easy to hold people accountable for how they're behaving against others. Other than that, then we end up just having moving goalposts. And that's one of the beautiful things about this program, is that it helps organizations to say what are the behaviors we want and how shall we measure for them. So if you're stepping on people's toes and you're not sharing information and you're hoarding resources and you're not supporting your team members to reach their results, then your 30 billion is useless that you're supporting. Yeah, because we're supposed to be working as a team.
My pastor always tells us that you are successful as your lowest member. So meaning that if you're a team, you need to pick everyone up so that you can be able to match. And yes, some might be slowed because of the saboteurs. You've seen some are outside our making. It's my parenting, it's my background. I really have not so much to do with it, but I can put going forward. If you can support me, and that's the support we're looking for. As an employer, the support you can give is an employee assistance program for these personal, internal, deep-seated issues that do affect people. By the way, everybody on earth has a potential. Everyone in the world was created to have a potential and to give something in the world. But it's only a person who has understanding that can grow out this potential. And we've lost many because we thought they can't do anything because we don't have what it takes to bring it out. There is a very interesting question from Evelyn Noah. She says, I'd like to appreciate if you shared a few testimonies on the initiative or program that have been successful in dealing with various challenges in the workplace.
I don't know whether that's my question or your question.
This cuts across, but I'll throw it to the technical person. As well, because I may not be able to name organizations here.
Because of confidentiality, we can't name organizations, but we definitely can't name people. But maybe one of the things I can say is I had 2 clients last year who showed up and were very frustrated about how work was going and their relationship with their leader. We had conversations, and what then came out was actually that they had not been diagnosed with they were neurodivergent. They had never been diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. We did the assessment, and then we also did the PQ to see how they sabotage themselves with coaching and with therapy, because for that we have to do both. This person is now doing amazingly well and has actually passed their KPIs. The other example I can give is of organizations where we are now encouraging them as leadership to do their PQ test, because that then helps them understand when the staff members say they are not safe, what do they mean? When the staff members say they can't speak out, what do they mean? And when you put this combination of PQs together and you chart it out, you say, oh my God, our leadership is 3/4 controllers, 2/3 hyperachievers, we are all avoiders. That means we're not solving any problems here. Then that gives an indication on what you're supposed to do. And one of the things I love about PQ is that it has uncovered a section of coaching and therapy that we didn't have language for maybe 5 years ago. Yeah, we didn't have language for what we are using right now. So maybe that's how I'm going to respond to.
Even I think
that we are making better leaders. We're making better
leaders, better employees as well.
Yeah.
Because people are dealing with things that are inherent that the organization can't solve, yet it needs their full active participation in the jobs of the day. We have about 2 minutes left. Actually, I think it's 1 minute. In 1 minute, I would like you to give our viewers a word about positive intelligence. Wrap up message for them to take home.
I think the only thing I can say in conclusion is we now have language that helps us understand how we behave towards the teams that we lead or to our family members that we didn't have before. People would complain about us, but we didn't have the actual language for it. Positive intelligence has provided that language. Now, when people have come into therapy or they've come into coaching, I can tell you, I have seen hypervigilant people who, when you actually do the assessment, they grew up in northern Uganda during the war, that they've never treated their PTSD. I have seen people who are hyperachievers, who are orphans, moved from home to home. They have to smile in order to get school fees, so that's how they've learned to be. I just have to do well in order to be accepted. So these things follow you into the boardroom. They follow you into the boardroom. They follow you into your leadership. They follow you into your parenting. We now have language for this. We now have an ability to connect the sabotaging behaviors to the issues that are unresolved in your life. But most importantly, there is hope. There is hope. There are solutions. They are not expensive. They are not foreign, because we solve within the way we understand ourselves culturally, with our religious beliefs and systems. We work with what we have in terms of resources. So we're not turning people into something that they are not supposed to be. It's really about saying, how can I show up as my best self? And this is one of the tools that we can use.
Work environment at its best. And again, once again, we want to thank you so much, our viewers, for hanging on to this show. This evening, I'd like to once again thank Tina. Tina, you amaze me. Tina, you're a personal coach. Thank you for being wonderful. Thank you for researching. Thank you for looking out for the best for the workspace and for our viewers. Would like to say that we're going to share the audio again for you to continue learning. But also, Tina is available for a personal workspace talk on the same subject and more of what she's talked about, on coaching, on therapy for you. We also have other range of experts that can talk through. If you have trauma, their trauma experience. If you have family, their family experience. As Minet, we have a range of over 60 therapists, or what we call experts in psychosocial support, that can support you in the different areas that cause the sabotage that we've been talking about. But with all this, I'd like to thank our media team out there. Thank you so much for keeping the show alive. Mr. Moses, thank you so much. Mr. Timothy, online, we appreciate what you have been doing. And for all our clients, we love you. We love you. Securing Africa's future. Thank you. See you next time.